Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so are you ready? Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. So we're going to start with this session. I am Ana Razo. I am a professor in CIDE. In this program regarding public policies, I have experience regarding evaluation that has to do with education, but I have also done other things regarding public education, evaluation. This is actually a challenge for me because this is the first time I am going to give an online class. But please provide feedback, let me know whatever you want. I would like to interact with you as much as possible, and I would also like to make this class very interesting. So let's start. I would like to say first that it is a challenge because we have 4 sessions for a program starting today, and well, I am concerned because I really need to draw your attention. Otherwise, it is going to be really hard to keep going with the other sessions. So let's start talking about process evaluation. And well, I wanted to conduct a survey so that we can get to know each other a little bit more. And I wanted to have some questions, but if we do this, then you are not going to be able to check the results in real time. So I am going to change this a little bit, and I am going to ask you to answer this in the chat. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, how many have participated in conducting a process evaluation? Okay, Johnny, Jimena says that she has been doing this. Somebody else? I am going to take note of this because I am going to give you some examples later on. Jimena is going to help us. So Jimena has already done this. Someone else has already participated in a process evaluation. Okay, so my next question, someone has asked for a process evaluation as a part of your what you're doing. Have you hired one? Okay, no one. Okay. Okay, so that is very important because then you need to take into account my examples as well as Jimena's, but I think that we have a lot to work on. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And as I told you in the beginning, the purpose of these 4 sessions and what I want to achieve is to draw your attention regarding process evaluation. I would like to draw your attention so that you can be something very, very interesting for you. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so... Okay, perfect. So Jimena says that she has already participated in a process evaluation, and we are going to check the theory later on. And in these 4 sessions, my main purpose is that that I draw your attention to process evaluation, and so that you can say, yes, I want to conduct process evaluations, or I want to have one for my programs. And well, how are we going to cover this? And please feel free to add feedback. For instance, if you want to talk about something, for instance, any topics that we're not including here. And in these 4 sessions, we are going to do the following. The first one, which is today, I would like to talk about the general process of public policy, and then we can review some of the details that we're going to see later on. The second session has to do with the design of a process evaluation, how to design it, how to plan it. This is a very important part because we need to consider the types of questions that we're going to consider, and also how to have the right questions. In the third session, I would like to work on the execution of a process evaluation from the instruments, the monitoring, and also modification and adjustments. And the fourth session will have to do with the analysis and the report of process evaluations. And how can we influence the decision so that it can be feasible, useful, and useful for the one who is going to receive them. And this is how we're going to manage these 4 sessions. However, if there is something that you want to add or you want to check, please let me know, and we are going to cover this too. So what are we going to check in this first session? As I mentioned before, I would like to cover the general process of public policies, how this is included within this cycle. And I would also like to talk about what we understand by process. We talk about process evaluation, but this means the action, the public action. And I would also like to review why is it important to conduct a process evaluation, but also to explain how it is not important. And in the last topic, I would like to talk about the different types of evaluations and the questions that it answers. And lastly, I would like to cover the technical and ethical considerations. How so that it makes sense. It is very important that it is useful, but it also has to make sense for the state. And how can we achieve this? So do you think that this is a good structure? What do you think? If you want to add something that we need to include in this class, please let me know. So in the first session, as I mentioned before, evaluation has to do with a general process and why we want to have a process evaluation. And this is what I want to cover in this session. This scheme that you can see in this slide is a very general or global process that you might be aware of. This has to do with the process of public policies. So a decision of the state has to do with something that is considered a public program. This is a diagnosis and definition of the problem. The state recognizes a situation that they want to modify, and it defines it as a problem. So this is the first stage. In the second stage, there is an agenda, there is the problem is included in an agenda. In a third stage, there is the design of how to solve it. There is already you already have the problem, and to solve it, you need to follow some actions in order to modify that public problem. In the fourth stage, we need to have the implementation of the policy. We have already designed this, so now we need to implement this public policy. This has to do with the implementation. And the next phase, the next stage has to do with an evaluation, if this is working, if the public problem is being modified, to what extent. And lastly, this evaluation will provide enough information to work to redesign or adjust this if this is not working, or if this is not working, then you are going to end this policy. And this is actually a very serious problem. But this doesn't happen that much because the state will not be able to say, okay, I'm going to end this. Most of the public policies are ended because of the politics taken by some political parties that modify the term of the policies, not only decisions based on evidence to finish that program. So what does it have to do, the process of public policies and evaluation? And this is something that I want to explain. So for each one of the different stages, so for this, every single stage of public policies, there is a different interpretation and a different point of view. For instance, stage 1, as I mentioned, diagnosis and definition of the problem. This has to do with the solution. This is how the state says, okay, I am going to solve the problem in this way. The second stage that has to do with the public problem in the agenda, it's a political and social construct. This is an idea of the problem and how I am going to interpret this and work on this. Just give me 1 second. I am going to solve something that is going on here. We have, okay, just give me 1 second. Okay, so in this second stage of the public problem, there is a political and social construct, how we're going to, if this is going to be a priority, in what sense, the different things that we're going to do to change this. The third stage has to do with the design of the policy to solve it, and this is something that you might be aware of. This is causal logic. This is the map of how the stage aims at solving the public problem. So in that sense, this sequence or map will provide information so that we can understand if this is feasible and if this will be solved by the actions taken into implemented. And the next stage has to do with the activities. This is the roadmap of how I am going to do this, how I am going to go to the field, and I am going to operate the policy so that the conducts are transformed. So the implementation is where we're going to check if the design or the plan to improve the problem is actually useful and is working. And this is what we're going to check in, for instance, an impact evaluation. They provide enough information. And the last stage, the redesign process has to do with this. And this has to do with the implementation of the policy. The set of problems or programs and activities that are being used for the policy. And this is the part that has to do with process evaluation. So throughout these sessions, let's think that when we're talking about implementation of the policy, we're talking about a process evaluation in particular. So far we're good. Are you understanding what I am saying, or do you have any questions? Okay, so I would like to focus on this. I would like to focus on implementation and processes. We are not going to talk about impact because later on we're going to check to analyze this contrast. But when we are reviewing the evaluation of the state, we're talking about a process evaluation. Maybe you have already seen this throughout this course, but we talk about an evaluation as a systematic process of the results of an intervention of the program. So this means that we want to see if the program is working, and These are implicit or explicit standards. This is a definition by Carl Weiss. Maybe you have already heard about this, but I think that this is a very precise and concrete definition for the things that we want to assess or validate. So this is an action taken by the state. We have a set of standards and we want to check the difference of the reference. This is what we're going to understand as the evaluation. So why do we want to evaluate? Okay, we want to improve the current performance of a program. We want to determine to what extent and how the objectives have been achieved. So please also think about this as an action, not only as, okay, this was achieved or not. This is also a set of objectives and benefits that can be achieved in different extents throughout the program. We need to analyze what we have done to achieve these objectives, because if we do not know what we have been doing to achieve them, then how are we going to be able to copy them? So maybe you already know that evaluation is used to provide feedback to the process, to the learning process of the policy. And this has to do with the last section, because we want to do this, and the information obtained from the evaluation is going to help us to learn as an implementing agency. So there are different things that we can learn that are very important from the evaluation. Evaluation is also very important to make decisions on the public policy, if we want to adjust, or if we just want to end this. This is something that has to be with accountability and transparency, and maybe other things that we need to take into account to improve the design of new policies. So I would like to convince you that this doesn't only have to do with a mandatory thing, but this will provide other benefits regarding the learning and also in order to improve this. So to be more specific, in this first stage, the state identifies a public problem, something that they want to change. For instance, something that has to do with education, or many people are dying, or for instance, violence rates are higher, many people are in, or something that the state identifies it is a public problem. And then it says, okay, so I am going to intervene and I am going to create a public program, for instance, to fight poverty. I am going, for instance, to allot more resources or to improve the health of the population. I am going to have a training program, or I am going to provide contraceptives, or I am going to do something to fight this. And this will have to do with a theory of change. And also the evaluation tests the assumptions and premises. For instance, if the state says that it is going to do A, B, C, then they will achieve this. And then the evaluation says, okay, yes, if you do A, B, C, then you are going to achieve this. But in these sessions, we are going to analyze what actually this means. So we're going to define processes, we're going to define this. And this is actually a very common word. We use it on a daily basis. And this will help us to understand the logic of this kind of evaluation. So in this slide, this is a action path to address the public problem. What the state is actually saying that it is going to conduct to do to solve this problem. So A, B plus C, so what I am going to achieve. This also has to do with the execution of the public policy or the orchestration of the public policy. And this is a sequence and structuring of the assumptions to modify the situation that aims to be changed. This has to be aligned with the objective of the program and the theory of change. So, just as the draw that you can see here, I want to modify something, I want to change. So what do I decide to do, what I'm going to do first? So does it make sense? Are you understanding? So far so good? Okay, so I hope that you are understanding this. So let's start thinking about this process evaluation. If the process evaluation is this contrast between the action and the reference, and the process is this attack plan, what we want to do is that we want to analyze this attack plan. Okay, thank you, Jimena and Violeta, for your answer. But I would like to analyze this attack plan and how we are implementing this attack plan. And so we have, for instance, a public problem. We have the orchestration of a program, and this inadequate and suitable orchestration will lead us to an expected future situation. For instance, we have the design, the implementation, and also the results. So from the management, we want to analyze the implementation if the attack plan is going on as it was expected. So now let's talk about the next thing. We already talked about process evaluation and how to understand this in the framework of public policy. We have already explained the processes and evaluation. So what is process evaluation and why is it important? So we have very some definitions that I think that complement each other, and they tackle the intention of process evaluation from different points of view. For instance, the first one has to do with an assessment focused on the operation, activities, functions, performance, components, resources, and that are executed or included in the program. And this is actually everything. So for instance, we are going to include everything that is related to the attack plan. And another way to understand this is that it verifies what the program is and or if it is not delivering what was planned. This is very important for the identified population or target population. This is a population that has been pointed out as the one that needs to obtain benefits from the action of the state. And in process evaluation, the analysis of this population is very, very important, and this is substantial. So please keep this in mind. So Santiago says that this is just as an exercise of monitoring. And actually, yes, this follow-up or monitoring part, we will cover this in the second session, not in this one. So yes, actually it has to do a little bit with monitoring because it provides information on the decisions of the program, and this has to do with monitoring the action, of course, but let's say that the monitoring is the substantial part of process evaluation. And in the last part, as you can see, okay, there is a question. Milton says that process evaluation is maintained throughout the execution of an intervention. Milton is asking regarding the specific period. And actually what is very important to say is that it is not maintained throughout the process because of course it would be very, very expensive. But it is considered. It is included at a certain point in the evaluation if the processes are able to be operated in the field. So I'm going to give you an example. If there is a program, for instance, that aims to tackle obesity or overweight, if we design this And if we think that this is a program with a national scope that can be implemented in any country, then if we want to conduct a process evaluation in the first 6 months, then it will be highly likely that the information is not going to be very reliable because the processors are not very concrete regarding the different ways to implement them in the different states or localities. So of course, as you might have already checked that a process evaluation happens in the first year of the program to analyze how it was designed. But the part regarding the process, it depends on the scope of the program, if it is conducted in a locality or at a national level. So I suggest that you consider this in the third year when you actually think that the processes are already concrete. So this can be considered as a medium-term evaluation, yes, but sometimes there are medium-term evaluations that depend on the results. And in this case, what we want to do is that we want a medium-term evaluation not only for the results, but to analyze if the plan is being carried out as it was expected. So no, it doesn't mean that it is kept throughout all the process, but I suggest that you carry out this in the second year or in the third year to check if the processes are being carried out in the way in which it was expected, to maybe modify or change the processes if they are not happening in the way they were designed, and also to understand why they are not happening in the expected way. So Jimena and Milton also have this same doubt. If this can be understood as a medium-term evaluation, yes, but not regarding the results, only the processes. For instance, if we think of the transfers, we need to understand if they are happening in real time, if they are happening in accordance with the documents to provide that transfer, if all the conditions are being met. And we want to understand the process. We want to obtain information regarding the process and not the results. The way in which the program is operating in comparison with the design. Johnny asks if the evaluation is systematic, then if it is based on the objectives or if it is also based on the efficiency and effectiveness in order to improve. Yes, of course, it has to do with effectiveness and efficiency, because for the impact, then we will need another design, and then we will be talking particularly about an impact evaluation. So the efficiency and effectiveness, they are a variable. We are not going to focus on the impact, but effectiveness and efficiency understood as the success that we are already having regarding the implementation of the process. And this also has to do with what I already mentioned, the population being, the served population. If the program is reaching those that the people that were planned to, and if there are some actions that could be implemented, and this is a substantial element, because this evaluation gives rise to improvement. This is a formative evaluation, and it aims at providing actions for improvement. This type of evaluation has to do with the way in which the processes are being carried out, and this is the most viable proposal for the problem that we want to solve. And Joanna has a question. So we are not going to measure the goals, but the objectives. Okay, what we're going to measure is if the processes are being carried out as expected. we cannot talk about objectives so far, but we need to assess if the things are being carried out as expected, and if this will lead us to achieve the objectives that we set. So this is how we can analyze this. The objective of this evaluation is to understand if the attack plan is being carried out as expected, and if it is not, then why, and what can we do so that this route path can help us to achieve the objectives that we have. This process evaluation needs information regarding the objectives, but just as a reference for the program, and not as a part of the success of the program. This evaluation aims to provide information regarding the route plan path. For instance, I am going to give you an example. There is a program for families in poverty or in immigrants' families who had a lot of problems in order to have a house. So some of this program needed some documents, and this program provided help to build houses in the land that belonged to the families, but they wanted things as specific documents that were very impossible to obtain in such a short amount of time in order to obtain the benefits of that program. So a process evaluation said that it was impossible to address this and to help the target population because there were the documents were impossible to obtain, so they were not reaching the identified population, the benefits were not being provided, and it happened because the implementation could not be carried out. So there were some beneficiaries that were not able to obtain these benefits. So a process evaluation can provide information on this type of things, or maybe some obstacles. Okay, so regarding what Joanna says, what we are going to measure are the different conditions of the plan, and the execution of the plan is going to help us to achieve the objectives. So in these evaluations, we have a reference regarding the goals that have been achieved, but just as a benchmark. This is not an impact evaluation, this is only a benchmark and a reference to understand if everything is being achieved and if this is successful. So let's take into account this. The achieved goals are going to be a reference. So Joanna, please let me know if I answered your question. And then she says, okay, so this is like a management evaluation because this is a way to analyze this, because this is how we analyze management. This is how we analyze how we are conducting this plan in our SS. So do we have something else to evaluate in the process or only processes? So in this evaluation, we need to include the processes, but also the available resources and the way in which we organize the team. That's what I mean when I talk about the processes. We are going to evaluate if the available resources we can have them, and if the operating team has enough skills and expertise, and if it is also well organized to be able to implement this plan. So we need to understand this as a set of resources, organization, and also a team. So we're going to assess this set of elements. And in this type of evaluation, we need to understand and to analyze if we have data, such as the identified population, if this route path is clear for everyone, and if the population that will obtain the benefits, and if the resources are available, and also the institutional ability to execute this. And by this, I mean the resources, the skills, and the team. So I do not know if I answered your question, but this is the implementation and everything that is related to these implementations. Cindy also says, okay, so you mean that this is just as a flow of different processes, and to analyze if this is being executed as it is expected. So yes, this is included in the design, and the team in charge of the public policy or in charge of the program said, okay, so this is how it is going to work. This is a process diagram. So I'm going to explain the different things that we're going to need. I am going to receive. I am going to assess the beneficiaries. I am going to identify the ones who are going to obtain the benefits, for instance, a money transfer, if this is the case. And I'm going to set some conditions. For instance, if they want to obtain this money transfer, then their kids have to attend school, and I am going to follow up on this. So that is the design, that is my design. But for instance, in a specific period, I am going to check that everything is actually happening, that the participants actually have an account, a bank account. I need to monitor if they are sending their kids to school. And this is how we can analyze this. This is a way to see this. I have a route path, and the process evaluation is going to check that, is going to take that. It is going to monitor if this is working in the way in which it was planned. So I'm really happy that I am answering your questions. So Johnny wants to add something. So generally, the execution of the policy makes some adjustments to adjust the process in order to achieve this set of activities, given that the process might not have the adequate elements. So the changes are very important for the action plan. Yes, I do agree. And one of the benefits, and something that is very important regarding this evaluation, it is that it allows to modify. For instance, if the route path is not being executed as it was expected, this can influence the objectives. Therefore, we can change this. So yes, this is just a first step to analyze the activities and the route path or the attack plan. So yes, Johnny, I think that you are right. It is very important to be able to change or modify this. So I am going to move forward. And this is the definition of process evaluation. So in some words, this answers substantial questions. So for instance, how, what is being done, how many people are obtaining the benefits, who, where, why, when, to whom, how many, and in what way, and for instance, why it is happening in the way in which it was planned, or maybe it is not happening in that way. When can we expect certain phenomena, and in what way? So it includes several questions that are very descriptive and that explain the things that we are actually seeing. So generally, a process evaluation is going to answer several things. First of all, if the program is reaching the identified population. And some slides before, I need to analyze if this is reaching the target population or the expected population. Maybe you might be aware of the term target population and potential population. Have you heard this term before? So I am going to explain this. Okay, so yes, actually in this course you have already heard this. Okay, so this evaluation is the one that explains, okay, this is the target population and this is the potential population. So I want to know if this program is reaching this population, and if it is not, then why? I'm going to give you an example. I participated in a process evaluation. This is an educational program, and the objective of the educational program was to modify the management of some schools. So maybe you are not that aware of this, but in Mexico, public schools do not have their own resources. They operate with what they have or what they can. So they do not have specific resources allotted for the schools. If they want, for instance, to change something, they are going to ask for money, and the parents are going to provide money. So 15 years ago, there was a program that wanted to change this, and it says, okay, so the state was going to provide some resources. For instance, I think they were $20,000, maybe approximately $20,000 per cycle, so that they could improve and they could have an improvement plan and also obtain benefits. This program aimed at addressing the problems of the schools that were in extreme poverty. The objective was to reach these schools, but in order so that they could obtain these benefits, the schools needed to provide an annual plan and also a plan every 5 years, so that the state could provide these resources. And in order to solve their basic needs, the schools needed to provide both plans. And these plans were reviewed before a jury per each state. And the plans that included more strengths and the ones that were considered as the best, they were the winners and they obtained the resources. So they were almost 10,000 schools, or I do not know if maybe they were more, and this program lasted for 10 years, and that was the logic. So you have to enter into a contest to win those resources. And what do you think that happened? Well, when the jury analyzed the proposals on the projects that came from the most vulnerable schools were very, very weak projects. And this was easily understood. And in comparison with schools that in different contexts and that sent strong projects, and in comparison with other schools, they were very, very strong. And of course, they were the ones that were winning everything. So when you analyze the databases of the schools that obtained the benefits in the aggregate, the schools that were obtaining the benefits were not the targeted or identified schools. Actually, those schools already have enough resources and they had favorable conditions. And there were not many schools in poverty. And well, why was the program not reaching the target population? And when we conduct a process evaluation, one can identify that the way in which the participation or the way in which they are selecting the beneficiaries, then they are not including the population that is being discriminated. So in this question regarding the target population, it is something very important, because this allows us to understand the type of population that we are reaching. And if we are not reaching the target population, or if we are not making the necessary adjustments, then we are never going to be able to reach the population or the target population. And this is a very important example, because the inequality gap continues to grow, because this program continued to provide benefits to the schools that were not that vulnerable. and this will always be positive, but in some way this program was not achieving its objectives, because the objective was to achieve to reach the target population, and the schools that were more vulnerable. So this is very important for this type of evaluation, because this helps us to understand if we are reaching that population, and if not, then why. And we were talking about a process evaluation. It answers two things: if the program is reaching the targeted population, and if it is delivering its services, and also if its functions and operational structure are consistent with the design of the program and its standards. If it is doing what it wanted to achieve, and if it is delivering the services that it planned. So this, seen from a transversal point of view, this is a process, and this also helps to understand if the resources that are allotted in this program are enough, or if they should be used for something different. So this gives us a parameter of the administration or management of the resources. Okay, so we have another question here. Johnny says, okay, so how do we have a balance in the execution and the process evaluation? Okay, so we talk about policy regarding public policy, or do we understand this as politics? So, okay, Johnny, can you explain this? If this has to do with the policy or politics, what do you mean? Can you explain this? Okay, the actions of the policy. Okay, so just let me know if you're thinking this as policy or politics. And we have another question. So process evaluation has to include the projections in the future. Yes, this is a measurement of how we're doing so far. And if we realize that we are not doing so, that this is not going in the right way, and if we do not change the goal, then we need to make the necessary adjustments in order to be able to achieve the objectives included in the public policy. So I do not know if maybe some of you like to run, but for instance, if you start running 20 kilometers in the forest, for instance, at some point, you're going to have to stop or to realize if you're following the right path. Because, for instance, if you are not following the right path, then you are never going to reach your goal. You're going to reach some other place, but not the goal. So this is just an example, because this is not a full stop in the path, literally, because you're never going to stop the operation. But as a metaphor, this is a moment in which an external evaluator is going to check if this is going in the right way, if you are going to make some adjustments or not. So Johnny is adding more information. Within the fulfillment of different objectives, we might not have the necessary resources. So otherwise, this would not work for the process of public policy. So yes, I do agree, and that's why I was focusing on the fact that this is not a full stop, because you're not going to be able to stop the program. This would be against laws. But you need to be able to analyze this so that you can see if this is going in the right way. Of course, we do not have all the resources necessary. This is the main characteristic of the public policy. But we are going to be working in this session, and we're going to be covering different instruments that is going to help us to analyze some elements, how to use these different tools, some external and internal elements to be able to understand this program. We need to be effective. We need to have effectiveness and efficiency. Of course, you're not going to have enough time to end this program, but you can analyze this. Okay, so a process evaluation provides information on this attack plan, and it also provides information if we are reaching the population that we want, and if everything that was included, resources, structure, everything is happening in the way in which it was planned. So I am going to move forward. Why is it important and why is it useful? Well, it reports on the effectiveness and efficiency in the execution of operational processes. Johnny also said that effectiveness and efficiency is very important. I am saying that we're not talking about impacts. We're just talking about effectiveness and efficiency of operational processes. We're also talking about the identification of problems, obstacles, weaknesses, and operational weaknesses. What is not, for instance, why can I not provide the resources, and why cannot, is it something external or internal? Is this an obstacle that you were not expecting and that is happening right now? And well, we have a lot of obstacles, for instance, natural disasters, and this is something that you cannot prevent, and they can cause that the expected operation is changed, or maybe, and we need to react. And there are some situations that can be modifying the scope of these resources. I am going to give you an example regarding some of these obstacles. There is an educational program that transfers monetary scholarships for high school students, and this focuses on populations that are very poor. And what the program achieves is that it opens bank accounts and it deposits a certain amount of money. And what they started to identify in the program from a process evaluation is that they opened the bank accounts, and the idea is that the money, the design of the program was that, okay, we're going to deposit this, and after 10 or 15 years, the students are going to be able to obtain the money. So this was not a savings account. This was not an account to save resources, but the design of the program was that the money, for instance, the students needed the money for activities, for certain activities, but the program started to analyze that many accounts were being used as savings accounts, and the students were not using the money, and they did not understand why. But when they started to go to the different communities, and when they started to understand their contexts, in many of these communities, the violence context, for instance, there were no places to obtain the money, and the program did not consider this. For instance, they were not able to go, for instance, to the next corner and obtain the money. They in order to obtain the money, they had to travel to be able to obtain that money, and it also implies a travel and money. And in these communities, the security conditions started to be worse. It was no longer safe for them to travel or to go to other places to obtain the money from the bank. And if they were able to do this, then it was not that safe for them to travel with the money because of the violence. So therefore, the design was modified because there is an obstacle that was not expected. And this also had to do with the high rising violence, because the students were not able to go to the places where they could obtain the money. So this was an operational problem that was not helping the problem, and they had to make some adjustments regarding the future, because otherwise the money was, they could not obtain the money, and the bank accounts were canceled, so they lost the money. And at the end of the day, of course, we would not have scholarships that were being used, and this could not be measured in an impact evaluation. So if we do not fix that problem, then we cannot expect that we're going to reach the objective. I think that this was a very important example, because it is very important to identify through a process evaluation the different weaknesses and strengths in order to be able to achieve the objectives of the program. So it is also useful for documentation of processes and results. In this institutional learning, all public officials, we understand this, and we have a great skill to understand this, but we need to document this to be able to understand this in an operational learning, and to be able to document and record the adjustments and processes that we are going to conduct. It also will help us to identify opportunity areas, maybe some of the problems that are from the program, what I need to improve, what I need to change, and also something that is very important, and maybe one of the most important benefits, is that it has to do with accountability and transparency. What I am doing with the public resources that were allotted in order to solve or address a problem, I need to be held accountable how I am doing this, where I am doing this, with whom I am doing this. So this is a very important tool of democracies. And lastly, this list is just an idea, so that you can to draw your attention to this. So this is a formative evaluation. It allows to make decisions on the fly and contribute to institutional learning. It allows to correct the path, and it allows to be aware of this. For instance, if we are not on the right path, it allows us to react. So please think of this as a way of reacting. I want to add something of process evaluation versus impact evaluation. Process evaluation is less popular than impact evaluation. Impact evaluation is actually something very striking, because it is going to provide more data, and actually this is a mistake. Impact evaluation is always very appealing, but it also needs some implementation conditions. It needs a specific amount of time and availability of the information to be able to be executed. And a process evaluation is not that appealing, and it is not that popular, but it is very useful, because it is going to help us to react. It is going to help us to make the necessary changes, and it provides more information to understand if we are on the right path, or maybe if we need to adjust something. So in that sense, this will help us to achieve the objectives. Impact evaluation is not that useful, because it only provides information regarding if we achieved what the program wanted to achieve or not, and that's it. That is the measurement. Of course, an impact evaluation is very useful. I am not trying to say that it is not that important or that it is less important, because of course it has some benefits, but this impact evaluation is not going to solve everything always. If we want to, for instance, make some adjustments, or if we want to analyze how we're doing, a process evaluation is going to provide way more information to be able to broaden our objectives. And this is going to help us to achieve our objectives. I don't want to have like a contest, but I just want to convince you that a process evaluation is very, very, very powerful. So when So when are you going to say, okay, I am not going to need an impact evaluation, maybe just a process evaluation will be enough. We need to, for instance, a process evaluation will provide information on, for instance, if a program is not being successful and why. And in that sense, maybe the answer is going to be very obvious. It is going to say, okay, maybe you're not going to need an impact evaluation, just a process evaluation. In this case, if a program did not deliver the services, for instance, if the vaccines were not delivered in a hospital, and I am not going to need an impact evaluation to analyze the impacts of the vaccine. If a process evaluation will be enough, and who are the elements that are going to be included so that it can be delivered in the right time. This is enough if I want to measure the impact of the vaccine. The first thing that I need to know if it was delivered or not. And in the example regarding the schools, I do not need an impact evaluation if the books were not delivered in the schools or if the tablets and the educational software is not being used. It will not be useful to have an impact evaluation. I am going to need a process evaluation. So far so good. Do you have any questions or any answers? Am I convincing you or not? So, okay, in that sense, impact evaluation is not going to provide solutions for everything, but we need to understand how the processes are being executed. And in that sense, a process evaluation will be way more useful. So as you can see, I want to convince you that a process evaluation is way more powerful if we want to improve. Newton says, so the realization of a process evaluation, is it better to conduct this in an external or internal way? I think that it is better to conduct this in an external way because it is easier for us. The implementers of the program are already involved in the process, and not only the ethical part of this, but the time the implementers do not have enough time to be able to execute the operations and to follow up on the implementation of the process. So there's not enough time. And let's say that the role of the one who is implementing this, it is very hard for them to have an objective point of view or fresh. So also taking into account that when they are obtaining the information, the operator, for instance, if he or she asks to the beneficiaries if certain things are happening, it is very hard sometimes to obtain fluent questions or confidential questions if some things are happening with the beneficiaries. So I would like to suggest that it is an external evaluation because in some way this is a way to analyze, to get rid of the biased questions, and this is also going to guarantee confidentiality, and this also guarantees skills, comprehensive skills, not only for the design but also for the analysis and for the for obtaining this. And in that sense, I would like to suggest that it is external. There is an external monitoring of certain variables that is very helpful to obtain this, but this would not be regarded as a process evaluation. Johnny asks, okay, but if this is going to improve the process, then this would be considered as parallel. Yes, as I mentioned before, you cannot consider this as a full stop. So the fact that it is an external team, this will help us for the evaluation process. So there is no full stop because you cannot do this. So that's why you need to have an external team or external evaluator that is going to be able to achieve this. So, of course, the analysis and the evaluation takes time, but this allows to be very, very important. And in that sense, please do not think this as an adjustment from one day to another. This is an adjustment. For instance, the evaluating team provides information on the strategies, on the feasible analysis to make some adjustments, and then measures are implemented. But this happens at the same time. So what question answers a process evaluation? And this is what we're going to cover now, and the different types of evaluations. The different types can be classified in accordance with their role. And as I mentioned before, a process evaluation is a formative evaluation. Process evaluation is a formative evaluation. And I wanted to provide information on this. We're going to understand the metaphor. For instance, if you're going to cook something, let's say a soup, when a cooker tastes the soup, this is a formative evaluation because he says, okay, it needs more salt, or it needs more flavor, or it is very spicy, or maybe it needs onion. So he is tasting the soup. But when he tastes the soup and he realizes that it needs more salt, or maybe he needs more tomato, or the ingredient that he considers. However, when the customer tries the soup, that is a summative evaluation, and there is nothing else to do. Okay, you can say, okay, the customer or the one who is tasting the soup can add salt. Okay, but he is the one that received the final product. And he can add salt, for instance, but if it doesn't have tomato, or if it needed meat or vegetables, then you cannot do something else. So the thing here is that a formative evaluation allows us to react and to add the ingredient that it needs. So the customer provided the feedback, for instance, if the cooker was a good one and if the soup was okay. So that is a formative evaluation. It will allow us to add the necessary ingredients. And a summative evaluation, then there is nothing else to do. This includes the consequences and the effects of a program. And an evaluation can be classified from the point of view of the evaluator. For instance, an auto-evaluation, this is conducted by the same institution. You were asking that, for instance, if an evaluation, Milton said that if it was recommended to conduct this in an external or internal way, this can be conducted in an external way, and the internal evaluation will be conducted within the structure of the government. So someone within that structure that is able to conduct that external evaluation, a closed area, or within the sectors, and this is within the structure of the government, or an external organization, and these are external organizations, and this is an external structure. So of course we're going to have some advantages and disadvantages. This is something that we need to decide depending on the time and resources allotted and the objective that wants to be achieved. And this set of variables will help us to analyze this, because sometimes we're going to win and sometimes we're going to lose. And we also have the methodology, if this is going to be quantitative or qualitative, what question was aimed to be answered by the process evaluation. And this is not regarding picking sides, for instance, if you want it to be qualitative or quantitative, or this is not you need to choose the answer that you want to solve and the best reference to solve this. Someone has a question here. if some measures can be measured. For instance, this behavioral changes can be included in an impact evaluation, but a qualitative focus, for instance, would provide information on how we are. This is really hard for a process evaluation to measure this in a quantitative way, but if we have some indicators and some clues, for instance, if a behavioral change can be feasible. And it says if the process allows to make some changes in the design. Can we do this even if we do not have the other one? I do not understand your question. Do you mean that if this can be, if an impact evaluation can be conducted without an impact evaluation? That's what you mean? Because evaluations, yes, we have different types of evaluations. For instance, a design evaluation, a process evaluation, a results evaluation, and an impact evaluation. They do not have to follow a sequence, but they have a specific time because of the program. You can conduct a process evaluation and an impact evaluation without an impact evaluation, but you need to have information that is going to allow to guarantee achieving the objectives. So a process evaluation provides information on how you're doing, but if you did not conducted one, this doesn't mean that you cannot have an impact evaluation. Maybe you are going to, for instance, have a problem regarding the processes, but no, it doesn't mean that you have to have an impact evaluation in order to have a process evaluation, but in a comprehensive evaluation, you can notice that some of the processes achieve and for instance, if it achieved the objectives or if it did not address the problem and then the problem reached the impact evaluation, am I being clear? Do you understand what I said? So let's say that this was a sequence, but they do not have to, you do not have to have one to have the other. And we also have a classification of the different evaluations, or depending on the focus, we have a design or diagnosis evaluation. This has to do with a causal logic, and this evaluation provides information. For instance, if you are going to have ABC, then you are going to achieve this. This is the performance evaluation, and this is focused on the scope and on accomplishing and fulfilling the attack plan. And this has to do with the objectives of a program, of a specific program. But the ones that are widely known are these ones: strategical, impact, diagnosis, and processes. And by results, we understand this as the goals. So what answers does an impact evaluation answer? These are some of the examples to have a more general idea. For instance, how many people are receiving the service? The ones who are receiving the service are the target population. Are they receiving the quantities, types, and qualities of the suitable or adequate service? Are the beneficiaries aware of the existence of the program? This might seem a bit absurd, but sometimes something that is very important is if the beneficiaries are aware of the program and if they know who is delivering the services and why they are doing this. And you might be very surprised because sometimes the beneficiaries do not even know who is delivering the services. or the benefits. And many times they identify who, but they do not identify the government process or government structure that is delivering the services. And this is something very relevant because if we can identify this, then we can improve that, and this could help for the operation of the program. Another question is the operation of the program working in an adequate, for instance, if I'm talking about vaccines, if the program is delivering money transfers, if the program is delivering material resources for building houses, if the program is delivering computers, educational material, if the program is delivering training, or if the program is delivering training exercises for economic projects, what the program is delivering, and if this is working in a right way in accordance with the design. So the design is always going to be the reference. Another question would be, is the team in charge of the implementation is enough regarding the number and skills? For instance, in Brazil, if we only have 3 people in a team for the hospitals, then this would be something really hard. But if we are going to address the problems in the hospitals, and if the team doesn't have the necessary expertise of skills, this doesn't mean that they are going to be doctors. But if they do not understand the structure of the health services, and if they do not have enough experience in health organizations, then this might be a problem. And another question would be, if the program is well organized, if the program is working together with other institutions, if the resources, facilities, and financing is adequate, if they understand what they have to do, if the resources are necessary, if the resources are used in an effective and effective way. There is an educational program again, and the fundamental basis of its operation is that it's aimed to provide passes to elementary school students through videos. For instance, regarding maths or history, and the main idea was that the people the professors, the students received these videos, and then the schools received televisions and projectors, and they received these materials in video, and they were able to watch this. And the thing here is that when we went to the schools, then the video equipment were not used, and then they asked, okay, but why are not using them? And the answer was that if they say, okay, if we have this in the room, then they are going to steal them. So they have the necessary equipment, but they were not used because, for instance, when they were going to ask for the videos or televisions, the best way was to keep them locked away because otherwise they were going to steal them. And that's why they were not used. And of course, if the resources are used in an efficient way, if the program fulfills the established by the government or the ones who are providing the money, if the beneficiaries to understand what they have to do, if they have the necessary skills in order to help the beneficiary population, and if the beneficiaries are okay with the service. This is a qualitative service measure regarding the service. This is not an impact measure, but please think of this as, for instance, if the beneficiaries say no, then you can analyze this and why they are saying no, and then you can make the necessary adjustments. If the beneficiaries say, okay, but I am not receiving the money transfers, they are always late, and there are a lot of things that are not working, then this will provide an opportunity area so that this can be so that you can improve this. So from another point of view, what questions are answered in a process evaluation? If the management objectives are being fulfilled, if the services are delivered, if there is a failure in the scope. For instance, there might be many programs that include volunteers. For instance, you can identify the target population, but the beneficiaries will make the decision if they are going to become a part of the program or not. And this sometimes has to do with the dissemination of the program. Many people in the target populations are not aware of this because they do not know that these benefits are being delivered. And this can be known thanks to a process evaluation. Maybe they are not even aware, and that's why they are not participating. And then this can give rise to a failure in scope. Another question has to do with this, for instance, if the beneficiaries are okay with the benefits and if the administrative and management functions are covered by the personnel or staff. If the implementing team is facing some problems, what obstacles are they trying to tackle in order to conduct or carry out the plan? And this will help them to react. So we only have 10 minutes left. I am going to take 5 minutes, for instance, if you have any question. But in this last part, I wanted to talk about all the benefits and how powerful is a process evaluation, but it is also very important that it makes sense and what we need to take into account so that this happens. So it is very important to develop a process evaluation taking into account the following. There has to be a coordination with the ones in charge of implementing the program, and then we have some decisions regarding the process evaluation that have to be agreed. For instance, what topics are going to be evaluated, how they are going to understand the process, how they are going to map the process, what topics need to be more highlighted, the information sources and the sample of people who are providing the information. We need to work with the ones who are implementing the program to understand the databases, the specific data regarding the implementation, and they are the ones who are going to have this information and who is a key element and who is not. For instance, if I want to talk with the beneficiaries, of course I want to understand their point of view, but we have different types of population, for instance, senior citizens, women, men, who can help me to have these key elements to interview. For instance, if this is a head of department, if it is the head of financing. So I need to understand this. We also need to take into account the coordination between the delivering of the information and how I am going to obtain these databases, how I am going to contact the ones who I am going to interview, if I am going to have focus groups, how I am going to locate them, if the program is the one who is going to talk to them. We need to plan the different presentation sessions, how we're going to discuss the results. We're going to cover this in a more detailed way in the last session, but this is also very important because we need to monitor together with the ones who are implementing the program if this makes sense. If the progress, the assumptions that we already have and the hypotheses that we already have, if we are biased, if we are interpreting our data in the right way and in the right context, and we need to discuss the results that we are achieving. We also need to know the reference terms, the regulatory documents that will guide us. And also, we need to take into account that the evaluation has to be useful for the program. This doesn't mean that we're going to say, okay, this is a good program or this is a bad program. This is not an impact evaluation, but this has to do with the evaluation that is being provided, and this information has to be useful to improve the program. So, in order to make sense, we need to recognize the importance of having common basis for the evaluation. This means that, for instance, we have a reality and different cognitive structures, but we need to have a common ground, and we need to understand what the process evaluation is achieving and what it is not wanting to achieve, and how we are going to interpret the information. And it is also important to remember that this happens in real scenarios, and this can influence the programs. This has to do with, for instance, biased points of views. Sometimes there are teams who understand this, but we need to remember that when we are going to implement this, we need to understand the context and the many things that cannot work out. For instance, we need to take this into account, and this is very important because maybe some of these scenarios can modify the implementation of the program. And in the third point, we can see here that process evaluation doesn't consist only on answering the question, but also on defining the question. And this has to do with the coordination of what we want to evaluate, what we want to focus on, and how do we answer this. And that is the difference between process evaluation and impact evaluation. And that's why we have to have questions related to process evaluation. I know that it is very easy to say, okay, is the program working or not? And this is an impact evaluation question. We need to have an approximate if the resources are being delivered if the target population is being served, if the route path is being executed in the right way, and a series of things that are going to help us to understand if the program is being successful or not. And in the last section, we need to understand that regarding the analysis, it is very important to take into account the qualitative information that arises from the expertise of the team. We need to take into account this because it is very important to consider the information that others share with us. And there are some situations that we need to take into account as specific cases that are going to help us to understand why the program is working in that way. So the recommendations you have to be technical. We need to guarantee that this was designed with specific methods, scientific methods. If it is feasible to make necessary changes, I have seen some process evaluations that suggest that the program needs to double their resources and they need to modify the constitution. But this is not feasible for the program. And if we're going to do this, then we're going to have so many problems. So we need to be conscious and we need to be aware because what we propose has to be feasible. And we also need to consider if it is feasible to make the necessary changes. And we need to consider the different scenarios. They have to be concrete. If a process evaluation doesn't only include everything that doesn't work, but it also provides information on the different proposals in order to improve and the variables that we need to change and adjust in order to obtain the results that aim to be achieved. The recommendation also has to be relevant if it offers new perspectives and if it has some effects, and they have to be reliable. At the end of the day, the one who is going to implement a program has to understand if he can trust in this process. I am going to say something that maybe you have already seen, but there are some ethical principles that talk about a survey that it also includes the necessary skills to develop this. We also need to have enough respect and to trust everyone, and we need to be responsible regarding the different principles. we need to be honest, and we need to have to include scientific principles because we are responsible. Okay, so that is what I wanted to say. If you want to ask something, please let me know. Do you have any questions? Do you have any doubts or anything that you want to add? So yes, I am going to be the professor for the next sessions. We have a question. So the information sources of a process evaluation focus on the beneficiaries and on the team. Well, yes, the answer is yes. But let's remember that the team who is going to execute this is a variable. We have some indirect beneficiaries and direct beneficiaries. And then we need to take into account both. And in the regarding the execution, for instance, a program that is being implemented nationwide, then it has the federal authorities, but it also has local authorities at different stages and levels, and it is going to depend on the government structure. But we need to take into account the different levels and the information that is going to take into account the processes. And besides, we also need to take into account the ones who are providing the resources. This doesn't have to do with two types of actors. We have two types of actors that are included in these two types of evaluations. And okay, do you have any other questions? So in that case, the information sources of an impact evaluation are going to change. Well, not in the sources necessarily, but the strategies to obtain data. For instance, in an impact evaluation, you need a control group, and in this case, you're going to obtain information from a population that had the characteristics to be included, but it was not. And to make a contrast, because the effects that you are going to obtain in the beneficiary population, they are directly related to the program. And the design is going to be modified. I really hope I answered your question. And Mirna says, okay, so to have a process evaluation, do you need to have specific instruments? Yes, of course, a process evaluation needs specific evaluations aligned with the questions that a process evaluation aims to answer. For instance, the beneficiary population is the one that is being served. The services are being delivered in the way in which they were expected, and in that way, the instruments have a specific design to be able to be accountable. So I hope that this answers your questions. Stacy says, okay, so generally the budget of the programs are also allotted for this and not for the process evaluation. Do you think that a budget should be allotted for this? Yes, I think that it is very important because of course we're going to need some resources in order to obtain data. So yes, this would include a budget. Maybe you can conduct some monitoring, but you're going to need a more detailed design. And we're going to cover this in the next session regarding the medium-term evaluation so that we can understand if we are talking about the same thing. Maybe this is a reference that I am not aware of, but maybe this is the same thing. I'm going to check this and I'm going to cover this in the next session, okay? Okay, thank you very much. So this is it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. This was a very interesting experience. I hope I am going to change some design things for the next session, but it was a pleasure to talk to you. So, okay, I'll see you on Friday. So have a great week. Okay, no, Thursday. Okay. 9 a.m. Thursday. Okay, thank you so much. Bye.